Day one of free agency, one that started off with little reason for hope, happiness, or optimism, turned out to be a pretty solid day for Joe Douglas and the Jets. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio, jetnation.com. Be sure to log in to jetnation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. It's late, I know. It's like 5:30 local time a.m. My kids are getting up for school in a little bit. That's how late it is right now here in the UK. Stayed up all night for free agency in case the Jets made a move. Glad I did because would have been upset to have missed it. Inactive day early on. Fans were getting frustrated. The Jets lost Bryce Huff to the Philadelphia Eagles, which had been rumored prior to the start of free agency before the legal tampering period started. As I said, This stuff probably starts during the year. Let's be honest here. But Bryce Huff goes to the Eagles, 17 million a year. A couple things I wanted to touch on regarding Huff that I hadn't mentioned previously. I talked the other day about, maybe Joe Douglas didn't make that deal. We saw the report that Joe Douglas was getting offers for Bryce Huff and he turned them down, held on to him, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, he's letting him go for nothing." How we doing, Wild Wave? Glad to see you, buddy. And yes, Joe Douglas did let Bryce Huff walk, but you have to look at it, or the way I look at it is I don't know. We don't know what teams were offering Joe Douglas. That's one piece. If they're offering him a day three pick and Joe Douglas feels like I can get a round 3 or 4 pick, like I can get 70, 80 slots higher next year, in which case he's betting on himself because, yes, if this team fails, he might not be around next year. But if he is and he gets a 4 or a 3 for Huff, he'll be glad he turned down that 6 or the 7. The other part of it is, and we hadn't really talked about this because they had such a bad season. I think we all kind of knew the chances of them contending weren't really good once Aaron Rodgers went down. They had a winning record at that point. I mean, I don't think anyone thought they were going to do anything special, but Joe Douglas probably didn't want to trade one of his best players while he was 4-3. Kind of hoping for a miracle. And the other part, and this one didn't really hit me till today. And even though I'd mentioned this a year or so ago or earlier last year, um, when you saw the price tag, 17 million, that's an awful lot for any player, even if you want to say, oh, he's worth it. Given the Jets scheme, whether we like it or not, Huff's playing half the snaps. You look at what the upper tier, upper echelon guys are playing, and he'll play more in Philly. But because of Robert Sala's system, and Salah and Ulbrich insisting on the heavy D line rotation, they were never going to pay $17 million for a guy who plays 50, 60% of the snaps. That's a tough sell for ownership. So a lot of moving parts. Like I said the other day, people say, oh, homegrown guy, talented, productive, you should have kept him. I get all that. But there is another side to it, and those are just parts of it. We don't know what they were offered in trade. Joe Douglas might be planning on getting more than what he was offered. It's tough to pay that much for a guy who isn't a full-time player. And the Jets may believe that, if he plays full seasons, the production may dip because he'll be a little bit more worn down. So it's neither here nor there. Bryce Huff's gone. Wish him luck. Was glad when he came on board as a UDFA. Glad he developed. Let's see, and that's we'll cover that. We'll move on from the Bryce Huff thing. So the Jets, they signed Zerline earlier in the day, 2 years. Glad they got him locked up. And, it's only 2 years, but I'm glad it wasn't one again because then you're doing the same thing again next year. It's got to be, it's nice to have a little bit of stability at that position because you get tired of having a new guy every year or two. So Zerline comes back on a 2-year deal. And then the new imports, they started trickling in a little while ago. The first two came one right after the other, like within minutes. The Jets signed left guard. They went to a former Raven left guard, John Simpson. Not going to sit here. Not going to sit here and pretend I've watched a ton of John Simpson. So what I did do was hop onto my DAZN Game Pass to take a look, and did find a few things that were encouraging. Well, the first thing, if you missed it, after the signing, somebody tweeted out a video of what was the Long brothers, Kyle Long and his brother on a pod, sort of randomly pointing Simpson out and giving him some credit for for the way he plays the game. And that was, even seeing that is nice. Like, give me an objective third party who doesn't have an interest either way. I'm not going to put a lot of stock in what his teammates say or what his coaches say, because they only ever say nice things about each other with every organization. I don't want to hear what the Jets say because they signed him, so they're only going to say wonderful things about him. It's like, give me an experienced, a guy who's been in the league, who knows what he's watching, who has some nice things to say. So Chris Long was complimentary of him, so that was good to see. Threw on a game, watched the game and a half, watched the game I watched in full. Every snap was San Francisco. So the things that jumped out at me with John Simpson, we saw the penalties, by the way, in terms of looking at his numbers after the signing. 11 flags last year. That's discouraging. That's concerning. But the things that jumped out on film, and I tweeted some of this stuff out. You see my Twitter handle down there at JNRadio_Glenn. But the things that jumped out, and you'll see some of the clips that I tweeted out if you take a look at those. John Simpson, always looking for work. Probably, I don't think I saw a single snap where you felt like he could have gone after somebody and didn't. And we've seen that too much in recent years with the Jets. We've seen guys where there's nobody in their area that they're responsible for, but they're still head on a swivel, not a defender in sight, and guy to the left, guy to the right, engage with defenders, and no attempt to come off and help these guys out. So that was encouraging. A weakness that jumped out, and people have tweeted this at me. Oh, look, he only gave up 1 sack in 17 games. Let's be honest here. And I said this to somebody. I've said it to a couple of people. He's blocking for Lamar Jackson. Like, that helps. That's going to keep your sacks allowed pretty low. Like, you're going from Lamar Jackson last year to now this year, 41-year-old post-ruptured Achilles Aaron Rodgers. So expect that number to jump. Expect that number to go up. And what I did see a few times, that, again, you can get away with it with Lamar. Saw Simpson get driven back into the pocket a few times, like quickly. He recovered, dropped his anchor, kept Lamar upright, but Lamar has that ability to move in the pocket and get out of the pocket quicker than Rodgers is going to. So you see him get driven back often enough with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron might get caught a little bit more than Lamar does. So that's something to keep an eye on. Again, it's just one game. Only saw it 2 or 3 times, but when San Francisco stunted or ran twists to his side, seamless transition, didn't seem to have any problem with that, which has been an issue with the Jets. And not just under Keith Carter, even going back the last few years, we've seen the Jets offensive line, the number of times it just looks like chaos. And, we've all seen the clips and the videos of people, the linemen looking around at each other, and there's, 3 linemen standing in one spot, not blocking anybody, and somebody who stunted or somebody who ran a twist is in the backfield chasing the quarterback. So that was, again, only saw it a couple times, but he looked pretty seamless picking that up. One thing I've read this, when they, again, in the San Francisco game, anytime he pulled, he did pull sort of into a crowd, didn't really get a clean hit on anybody. The PFF, I looked at not just their grade, but their little scouting snippet. They had like a couple sentences on each guy. I believe the way they put it was, on polls, he has polls on film where he launches guys to Neptune or something like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I didn't see that against San Francisco, but PFF is saying that's a strength of his game. But again, stunts and twists, he looked good. Bull rush, he struggled a little bit. Was consistently looking for work, and he did manage again on several plays where it looked like he was out of it, and he dropped his anchor and held up. One play in particular I shared, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. It almost looked like the offensive or the defensive lineman sort of gave up mid-play, because he starts winning the rep. Simpson drops his anchor, stands him upright, and then it almost looked like the lineman just kind of stopped, and Simpson just didn't stop. Grabbed him by both shoulders, launched himself into him, drove the defender into the ground. Kind of thing you like to see, play through the whistle. So look, I'm not going to sit here and say that this guy is, the next big thing. And here's the problem, right? Is because of what we've seen on the offensive line in recent years, the bar is so low. I'm watching this guy and thinking, well, I haven't seen him trip and fall on his face yet, which was sort of a staple of some of the guys they've had out there in recent years. And then I have to remind myself, you got to look higher than that. It can't be well, look, he didn't pull and trip and fall on his face, or he didn't just completely whiff and fall flat on his face. Like, you've got to look for productive plays. So, but in all seriousness, he looked all right, not great, but better than I feared when I and this is why you can't really go with the PFF grades. PFF grades were bad, 56.5 overall, not good at all. So it looks like they got a guy who can do some things well. Again, isn't perfect. You're not going to get a perfect player for $8 million a year, which is what they paid for him. So you've added him. You've now got a starting guard in place. I would imagine, we've talked on our show, myself, Dylan, and Chris, about how we expect them to go out and get some guards and AVT to tackle. And then, left tackle is going to be something they're going to, I would imagine, through the draft. We'll see. An interesting note on that. I saw today, Senior Bowl executive director Jim Nagy tweeted out that the Jets were at Oregon State's pro day. I don't know if it was a typo, but he referred to Taliz Fuaga as a left tackle. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but we'll see. But Dane asks, does Simpson give our O line some teeth for once? Look, like I said, there were some plays where he does play with some nastiness. He is driving guys into the ground. And again, you mentioned Dane pulling with Tippmann. That's something we didn't see enough from Tippmann last year, and I said that during the season. That was something that was really frustrating because out of Wisconsin, when I talked about how I preferred him to John Michael Schmitz, like that was the reason. Joe Tippmann on the move was a monster. I mean, pulling and just taking guys out. And this is a guy, again, like I said, I only saw him pull a few times, didn't see him engage, didn't see him hit a target clean. PFF claims there's some great stuff there. So, I'm going to watch a couple more of his games today. Like I said, it's 5:30 in the morning. I don't know exactly when I'll be sleeping or watching or whatever. But the Jets got themselves a starting guard, does some good things, and we'll have more on that. I'm sure. I know Dylan was watching the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs while we were chatting, and I said, "All right, I'm going to go watch the San Fran game." And one of the reasons I went to watch the San Fran game is because moments after the Simpson signing, Javon Kinlaw, defensive lineman for the San Francisco 49ers, wanted to get a look at him, and honestly, didn't see a lot from him, but I was sort of hyper focused on Simpson because the O line is such a need. I just kind of threw that game on in case Kinlaw did something, that blew my mind, which he didn't. Kinlaw's a guy, freakish athlete. I can't even remember what it was. There was something he did in college or that got publicized. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list. And I saw his name and I was like, oh, that's the crazy athletic guy. Like his athleticism is through the roof. Against the Ravens, didn't get to the quarterback. Didn't get to the quarterback. He hasn't been a very statistically productive guy, and that's why he was available as a former first round pick. He did play for Robert Saleh his first year in San Francisco. Only has 5 career sacks. That's the negative. The positive is that 3 of them came late last year. So you wonder, is something starting to click? He hasn't been a regular every down guy on that defensive line where there's so much talent. So he does have some explosiveness. Like I said, he is a very athletic guy. Not very stout against the run, loses some ground there. But I think his value will be as a guy who can harass the quarterback. He may not stack up a bunch of sacks, but I think he had 28 pressures last year, which isn't a bad number for a part-time guy. I believe, again, PFF grades, take him or leave him, like 70. I think it was he had a grade of 70 against the pass. But again, haven't watched a ton of him. I was more familiar with him than I am Simpson, but I didn't watch Kinlaw as much as I watched Simpson today. But again, listen, Al Woods, Quentin Jefferson, these guys are leaving, a little bit older defensive tackles. Of course, Kinlaw will be a different role than Woods. You would imagine the Jets are going to add another DT at some point. They need somebody in there against the run, maybe a draft pick, maybe another free agent. We'll see what happens there. So Kinlaw takes one of the DT spots, and then backup quarterback. And fans may not like this. I would have liked this a lot a few years ago. I've always liked Tyrod Taylor. Not saying he's great, not saying he's a franchise quarterback, but I do feel like he's a little bit disrespected. I feel like Tyrod. Actually, I remember hearing last year or the year before. He's not a guy we discuss a lot, but I believe Tyrod is what he goes by now. So correct that. Tyrod Taylor is a guy who I've always liked, and I think that it's just nice. I wanted the Jet. All of us wanted this team to add a quarterback who. Let's throw this up there. a quarterback who's not going to just go out there and embarrass himself and embarrass the team. The Tim Boyles, the Trevor Simeons, the Luke Falks, like these guys that go out there and you literally can't get a first down. That should be a thing of the past with Taylor on board. They may add. I suspect they'll add another quarterback through the draft. My hope, give me a mid round guy. Give me a Michael Pratt or Spencer Rattler. Will he be there? Jordan Travis is actually the guy over those two even who I would prefer. Where does he go because of the injury? What's his recovery timetable? I'm not sure, but if I could have Jordan Travis or Pratt or Rattler in the late third, early fourth, somewhere in there to develop behind Rodgers and Taylor, I'd take it. That to me is an ideal scenario. But the Jets may wait till later. They may take one with Mr. Irrelevant, right? Take a truly developmental, take a Devin Leary, Jason Bean out of Kansas, older guy, probably not going to be on their radar. Maybe as a UDFA type. But back to free agency, the addition of Tyrod Taylor, I like it a lot. I think I haven't really looked to see what the reaction has been on Twitter because I've been watching Simpson, but I think Tyrod Taylor is a guy who, again, he's going to bring stability there. You're not going to say the Jets are going to their second quarterback and you just shake your head and think you're getting some guy who's never won more than a couple of games or a guy who's only ever thrown, a guy who's only thrown a couple passes at the pro level. I think that I think with Taylor you can breathe a little. He started 5 games last year. One of them he left early, actually, against the Jets. Of the 4 games he played in full, scored 27 and 25 points. And I get it. The 27 was against the Eagles' backups. But would you have trusted the Jets on most days last year to be able to? I wouldn't have trusted them to score 27 against some teams' third stringers. I mean, it was that ugly. It was that bad. So bringing in an experienced vet who's won some games, who's been around the block, he's probably gonna pick up the offense fairly quickly because he's seen and done so much. I like the move. Again, I was kind of thinking a Ryan Tannehill, somebody like that, a Tyrod Taylor, some veteran, even Jameis Winston, who's probably going to cost more than Taylor did because he's younger. Physically he's got some more tools. Obviously, much better arm. He's got a great arm. But for me personally, it was just like, just get a guy who isn't someone that you have to wonder, does he really belong in the NFL? Like that's what it's been the past few years with the Jets backups. You're looking at these guys and thinking, if not for the Jets, this guy probably wouldn't be in the league. Not the case with Tyrod Taylor. He's been around for a while. He's mid late 30s now, so he's not he's obviously past his prime, but still good enough to run an offense. And as I've said, with Aaron Rodgers being his age, I don't see Aaron Rodgers starting 17 games. He's going to miss some time at some point. Now, when you go to your quarterback, you don't have to feel like it's a complete unknown or a guy who doesn't belong. So that's some welcome news. So you've filled the hole on the offensive line. The big names went. And listen, we talked about this. I mentioned it many times leading up to the start of free agency. Actually said a couple of weeks ago that as free agency was getting closer, it was starting to bother me more, and I was starting to worry even more. And that was, do guys want to come play for this team? Do premier offensive linemen want to come play for Keith Carter? I said I didn't think they did. I said I thought the Jets would end up missing out on the big names, and they would have to end up going after the guys who only have a couple of teams chasing them. And we only saw one name. Let's see. Does Kinlaw replace Jefferson or Woods? Woods is the bigger, wider guy who's more of a run stuffer. Jefferson was a guy who could stop the run a little bit, but he was the guy who can sort of get some pressure on the quarterback. Career high 6 sacks last year. So I would say he's going to fill more Jefferson's role than Woods' role, and you go out, you get somebody else to fill Woods' role. Woods, I forget what he was listed at in the media guide or the roster, but looking at him on game days, I always felt like he's about 25 pounds bigger than that roster says. And maybe I'm wrong, but to me, he was a bigger guy than what he was listed at. But now the Jets, again, they fill the spot on the line. The top guys did go. I want to say Hunt. Connor Hughes said they were in on him, the former Dolphin, who got $20 million a year. And at that point, I worried a little bit because you think back to last year when the Jets missed out on Orlando Brown and basically packed up their tents and went home. So I'm gonna pull up the list right here. of the top guards. Well, really the tracker for NFL free agency in general. And I want to take a look at some of these guards who went because again, I know there were Jets fans were watching closely, and all the talk before the start of free agency was the Jets are looking at interior linemen, which yeah, of course they are. Like that's all we've been talking about for weeks. Um, so yeah, so Hunt went for 100 million to Carolina. Robert Hunt, of course, the guard for the Dolphins. Onwenu goes back to New England, 3 years, 57 million. Damian Lewis goes from Seattle to Carolina for 53 million. Jonah Jackson went to the Rams, 3 years, 51 million. No, that's not right, is it? It is. Wow. Well, again, that's up too. That's still a lot of money. 3 years, 51 million with 26. No, not 26. Let's see. Where did he go? Jonah Jackson got 34 million guaranteed. Okay. And Tyler Biadasz. Okay, he went to Washington. I missed that. So much going on. John Runyon early in the day, who I thought the Jets would be in on, he goes to the Giants. 3 years, 30 million, 17 guaranteed. And this is the way it went, guys. You know, the top the top linemen, the top interior linemen, which we knew were going to be the Jets' targets, um, didn't come to the Jets, and they tried. At least in one case, you would imagine they tried for a couple of big names, and it didn't pan out. But again, this was to be expected. You've got even with Keith Carter aside, you've got a lame duck head coach. You've got an older quarterback coming off an injury, so there are some unknowns there. So when you're a free agent, you're shopping around and offers are competitive. And I get that money talks, and that's the reply I keep saying from people. Just pay, money talks. Right. But what happens when the other team matches? Like you're gonna get to a point where you're offering as much as you're gonna offer without going completely insane. And at that point, if it's a premium player, you're sitting in the same ballpark money wise with three or four other teams. And that's when they're going to say, all right, who's got a better chance to win? Who's got a better offensive philosophy? Who's got a coach I want to work with? And that's when those things start counting against you if you're the Jets. So it's not a surprise to me. Um, I saw a lot of people early on. Why didn't we sign this guy? Why didn't we sign that guy? As I've said, you can't force guys to sign, and it was unlikely that guys were going to sign with you to play for this team if they had multiple offers to choose from. So this is kind of where we are. Let's see. Peter says he hopes they draft a nose tackle on day 3. Listen, if they go out and get a second round pick, there's some guys I wouldn't mind on day 2. But that's all. I still feel like this team's got to trade down from 10, stay in the top 20, top 21, somewhere in there, and find a way to add a 2 and then maybe a day 3 pick and get yourself in position where if somebody like T'Vondre Sweat is there in the second round, you can take him. I think T'Vondre Sweat next to Quinnen Williams would be unbelievable. That would be absolutely phenomenal. As we've said, T'Vondre Sweat, big guy, 366, but he does more than just stop the run. He absolutely collapses the pocket, dominates guys. But it will be a need, and they will address it. Free agency, perhaps. Honestly, haven't spent much time looking at the D lineman and free agency. It's all to me. It's been so much of my focus has been on the interior line because the interior offensive line because that's where they need this stuff to happen. Let's see. And in case you missed it, Jets fans or Sam Darnold fans, I know you guys are still out there. Darnold lands in Minnesota with the Vikings for really what is the best scenario. Mercury says Aaron Jones. Wouldn't hate it. I just again like backup running backs. It's so far down my list right now. I feel, and everyone knows I'm a big. Well, maybe not everyone knows, but many people know I'm a huge Izzy Abanikanda guy. I want to see him get some carries this year. Dylan Terraman, our co-host earlier, was saying he would give up picks to get Aaron Jones, which I didn't like the idea of. Then Jones gets released, and it's like, all right, well, if you want to bring him in, that I can live with. And Bakhtiari is out there. We knew that was coming. He's tweeting him and Aaron. Aaron tweets him a heart because he loves him. And then he tweets out him and Aaron sitting on the wall in Lambeau having a chat. So, the Bakhtiari thing feels inevitable. And even if it is inevitable, as I've said earlier, or I said earlier today, you can't, even if you add him, you have to proceed as if he's not on the roster because you've got to assume that by week 2 or 3, he's out for the year. So you want to get Bakhtiari to make Aaron happy and bring in his best friend? Fine. Don't pay him a ton of money and don't proceed as if you fixed left tackle because you haven't. Yeah, Jones was released. I don't know if you were saying that or asking that, Peter. He was. But prior to him being released, we had a little group chat, and Dylan was saying, let's go get him. So, yeah, O-line is where the focus has to stay for now. There will be other areas. Safety. Look, there are safeties out there now. A couple of them signed today, but there's still plenty of safeties out there for this team to look at. Would have to. What time is it? I don't know. Your times went forward or behind. 6 a.m. here. I think it should be like 2 on the East Coast now. Our clocks go ahead like a week or 2 after the U.S. So yeah, I'm up till 6 a.m. here, reading, watching, talking about this team. Day one free agency in the books. More to come. Jets know they did not land any premier interior linemen. However, I don't know how many people expected that to be a realistic thing. Added 3 spots they needed and secured their kicker for the next couple seasons. Not a bad day for the Jets. You know, in a perfect world, they get a big name, big fish on the interior, but that just was not in the cards. I don't know how many people anticipated it. But the way it played out was the way it played out. To me, all in all, a solid day. Biggest concern, though, is that Simpson is a guy, yeah, he needs some development. Now he's going to work with Keith Carter. You know, the Jets have to, at some point, they've got to sign an offensive player who gets better, especially on the offensive line. Everyone they bring in gets worse. Everyone who leaves gets better. They need to reverse that trend. Let's bring in some guys who improve under this coaching staff. Will Simpson be the first? We shall see. That'll wrap this one up. More coming tomorrow. We'll have plenty. I don't even know what is Monday. So Wednesday night, myself, Dylan Turman, Chris Schubert will have plenty more to cover. Hopefully, definitely, I would imagine. Some more names to talk about. Have a good one, Jets fans.